I'm going to talk to you guys about back to basics. And before I forget, I'm going to introduce myself. Okay, let's just jump over there. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes talking about my journey and a little bit about me. And then I'm going to get to the meat of the topic, which is navigating geopolitical trends in this time that we're currently living. And we'll get into a little bit of the polls that I put out there for that. But I will just talk to you a little bit about my journey. I am originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I moved to England after the military dictatorship ended, and we thought it would be a peaceful time. It was 1990s in England. There was a lot of terrorism activity from the IRA, and that's what got me started into being absolutely fascinated by military history and computers. I also am a huge advocate, and have always been, of empowering women and others that are underrepresented in computer security in all the fields. I think that is hugely important. And I've been very emotional and thrilled with this year's presenters and their commitment to the DEI work. I am also really excited that I am part of the Interplanetary Networking Special Interest Group. Does anybody know what that is? Go ahead.
Well, I know you do it, and space.
There we go. Yes. Does anybody realize that we have a solar system internet as well as a terrestrial internet? And it is very vital to start thinking about security and architecture for that before we deploy it fully. And that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about. Now, the intelligence lifecycle. I don't know how many of you are familiar with doing cyber threat intelligence. I have 2 graphics here because when I first thought of this topic to present, I realized that, I'm going to go into the basics with Richard Harris, psychology of intelligence, the life cycle of what it is that we do in order to collect the information that we need to develop into actionable intelligence. And then AI came into the scene at RSA. A lot of announcements were made by multiple companies, including Google Cloud. And I shifted a little bit of how I was going to address the intelligence lifecycle here, because the innovation that we have going on, powered by Google Cloud Security, it's called Security AI Workbench, and it is an LLM trained on Google Mandiant and VirusTotal information data, and it offers customers the ability to mitigate and determine their threat profile and risks to the organizations without necessarily having all of the resources that a company must have to secure themselves. I said I started doing this when I won't say my age actually. I've been doing this for about 10 years. Let's just make that up now. I used to spend hours going through Excel spreadsheets, documenting and logging each MD5 or piece of evidence of different artifacts. And it's hard. If you miss one little word or a letter, you've got a whole different hash. And keeping track of your work is vital to making sure that the work that those talented folks that have been doing this forever is replicated, continues to be done in a successful and ethical way. Now I'm gonna go. Yeah, no. There we go. So for those of you that may be familiar with Mandiant, now part of Google Cloud, we really talk about the whole life cycle of an incident that may happen at an organization. We're talking about network intrusions, ransomware, pick your flavor. Myself, I am on the nation state analysis team, and I have been on that team my entire time. I don't know how many people here have been in this field for a while, but my background goes to iSight Partners, FireEye, Mandiant, and Google Cloud. And it's pretty awesome that within Google Cloud and all of the Mandiant startups that came with it, there's just so many different topics and niche that you can get into. And it now allows me to be able to focus on the life cycle, which will lead us to determine when we see a threat actor, Where are we on the life cycle? And based on that, what is it that we need to collect on to be able to deliver some actionable intelligence? One of the things, sorry, I'm gonna put it here. One of the things that's really, really relevant, and I actually put a poll, so I don't want to forget about the poll. I think I left my other phone somewhere. Okay, did I leave it there? Okay, so I talk about, I'm going to move to this slide actually, because we're going to go back to basics for cyber threat intelligence. But in order to do that, I'm going to pause and talk a little bit about historical geopolitical context and how it is imperative to remember to still think of that and do that, especially in an age where the generative AI is being used and implemented in a lot of different fields. And in order to have the correct output, we need to have the correct input. And we need to understand that each phase is derived from another, but also we need to consider what's going on externally. And if we accept that the generative AI will allow us to eliminate some of the toll and toil that it takes to loop around the intelligence life cycle and produce finished intelligence that the C-suite and others and network defenders can deal with, we don't want to lose the ability to conduct that critical analysis that considers events like, what is happening in Sudan right now? Has anybody paid attention to the fact that there's cyber activity going on there? And if you don't have a historical knowledge of Sudan's unfortunate history of civil war, there are a lot of nation state advanced persistent threat actors all acting there. It is huge to know what's going on there. We need to understand that Sudan has a relationship with Ethiopia and it has a relationship with Egypt. What happens if Ethiopia's dam is somewhat compromised? That's who gives the water to Egypt. Like, this seems very basic, but unless we have that knowledge and the ability to do critical thinking related to that, we're not going to be able to successfully complete that step-by-step intelligence life cycle that CTI analysts have been working on for over 20, 30 years. It is fantastic to be able to use tools that make something that would take me like, let me go to this one here. So what is going on there? There you go. There we go. So for planning and collection, so let's go with one recent global conference event. So during typical annual conferences, whether it's G7 or G20, we will start monitoring and hunting and collecting data to determine whether any entity or individual or governments or corporations are at risk or could potentially be spearfished in these situations. And when you first receive a file or a hash, and it points to, oh, this looks like it's related to G20 security crisis. Okay, I'm going to start writing that. And that's actually a report that I started writing on. And halfway through realized, no, I'm going to pick this up so I don't mess up the actual thing. But the real story was the G20 was not the actual conference that was being targeted. If I hadn't kept digging and looking to see what countries were receiving this email, what were they talking about? Food security. It was actually G7, but they were using a stolen email that had been part of the G20 conference. So all of those rabbit holes, some of them make sense to keep stand that the collection needs to be comprehensive and take into account the different visions of the world and the different stakeholders that we have. I currently have a lot of my step-by-step slides blank because the current global geopolitical world that we live in is changing so fast that activities from one week to the next impact how we do the work one day to the next. We still have strategy, we still have the planning. I know that Mandiant and Google Cloud were very involved in preparing and supporting organizations for different events that have been going on politically and
militarily. And a lot of it takes time. We spend months planning these things and thinking about what we will collect, defining what the requirements are in our research. And if things change, we have to be nimble. The collection is one of those things where we bring in all of the information. Sorry, that's collection over here. And I need to make sure, or the analyst needs to make sure, that the data you have is all encompassing of all of the different views within the problem. It's very easy for us in the Western world, in the United States, to merely look at mainstream media and have a very narrow vision of what's happening in the world. But it's really, really valuable to take a moment and just think about all of the different conflicts that are occurring, the different economic negotiations, international agreements. All of those are now also part of the cyber realm. They're being used as part of normal strategic and military purposes. I keep forgetting that that's the one. So for the processing, that's a fun one. The best thing I can say about processing is that it is way easier nowadays than it was when I first started. I can give you an example that I collected information on probably a few hundred companies, and I needed to understand what financial associations they had and where their headquarters were, as well as if their headquarters was somewhere that didn't make sense, was there another location and it just wasn't talked about. I got that within 10 seconds by just inputting all the company's information. And we used to have to do that manually. It's called market research. It takes a really long time. And so to reduce that processing time, the automated collection that we're getting from generative AI is really, really helpful for a lot of the tips that people use nowadays, threat intelligence platforms. And it's, increasingly going to be baked in to organization security posture. What you're getting when you get something like, security that's built by design, you're ensuring that that zero trust is built in and your logs, your data is secured by, and we're keeping track of it. Now, the analysis, that is the part that I like the most because it's the part where I get to write the story. I evaluate all the data. Sometimes I spend about a week. Sometimes we spend about 4 weeks. Sometimes we spend over a year. I have certain projects that I'm working on that I've been collecting and processing, and I'm still in the analysis phase for about 4 or 5 years. And I just kind of leave them sitting and I pick it up as needed. The analysis sometimes feels like it's missing, or halfway through the collection and processing, it's gone. And a lot of the times that means I'm stuck and I need help from someone else to see the problem in a different way. I think that interpreting processed information takes a lot of critical thinking skills, and it doesn't just, suggest, but I believe we should require that it has a lot of diversity to ensure that the analysis output reflects the worldview that we are facing today. Now, the dissemination part may seem pretty simple, but when you do cyber threat intelligence for governments and Fortune 500 companies, they want the report on what they're seeing on the news like yesterday. It is very, very hard to do that. The great thing with real-time intelligence and AI is that we're now able to push out the indicators, the information that customers and companies need to know in order to protect themselves. Now, the narrative and the storyline about what happened with that G20 email and the G7, who was it targeting? The analysis team writes that up and we disseminate it to our customers. They get to read that story. And while they receive the indicators beforehand, now they have a context for why is it important and what other situations in the world and in the business world might this affect that is relevant to them. This one here. The feedback part is increasingly gaining a lot of momentum, and I love that. talking to stakeholders, customers who are getting your actionable intelligence is absolutely vital. There is nothing more important than hearing from your customer what it is that they're worried about. Now, do we sometimes find customers are worried about potentially the wrong things? Yes and no. I wouldn't say they're the wrong things, but they just might need to be explored a little bit more and kind of discussed to understand, oh, my main problem isn't advanced persistent threat actors. I should be looking at financial actors, or I should be looking at hacktivists. And these things change very, very frequently. The analysis team at Mandiant with Google, we have some of the most tenured people. People have been there for 10, 15 years. And the institutional knowledge that we bring with us allows diversity and enrichment to that data that we're pumping into the LLMs to enable the security AI workbench. Oh, this did not play like it was meant to. So let me just put it all out because that was weird. Nope, I'll go back one. Okay, so I talked a lot about the importance of geopolitics. And I know that this is to go over the step-by-step of CTI. I'm happy to talk about that more. What I really, really want to focus on is this is your journey. Whether you've been doing it for a while, you're mid-level, senior level, we're all looking for different things every once in a while. So take ownership of your career. No one else is going to do it for you. Design your own path. Go out there, meet people, be ambitious. It's not bragging if it's based on facts. I don't know if anyone here is part of the I Am Remarkable program. I'm a facilitator. We talk about self-promoting. Women and men alike have trouble with that. Let's just break that barrier. I am super, super accomplished and proud that I'm part of the interplanetary solar system internet. I think it's kick-ass. Network with intention. Mentor, coach, give back, upwards coaching, peer coaching, downwards coaching, all of it is so incredible and it brings so much back to you and the industry. The other thing that you should keep in mind is that when you're paying it forward, everyone in the CTI world knows everyone. And if we don't know you, you probably know someone that knows us. So it'll all come full circle. And also just be realistic. I know there's a lot of people that believe cybersecurity is a brand new thing, but it's not. You know, we've been doing it for a while and the industry is still maturing, but you are not likely going to be able to get the dream job right out of college. There's lots of people that have been working on this too. Don't be discouraged. Please don't be discouraged. Find your place, find your people, and just keep learning. You know, never stop learning. Look for different courses, different brown bags, different events, anything that you can go and meet others and share your knowledge, as well as have others share their knowledge with you. That's what matters. That really will make a huge difference in your career in this field. As the keynote earlier spoke about, you know, cybersecurity is really hard in terms of the emotional toll it puts on you. I know that during the SolarWinds incident, a lot of the threat analysts, we were burning out and we instituted healthcare days, or what was it called? Mental health day, yes. And that was wonderful because it is very helpful to go outside, just take a break. But during all of it, just be passionate and keep searching for the next cool thing. And know that Moore's law that I asked about, it is not a physics law. It is both an empirical evolution, but also a belief that, you know, as technology changes, we will be meeting it exponentially every 2 years. Now, Moore himself, before he passed away, he did not think that this technological trend would continue much past, I believe it was 2030, but we'll see. What's really cool, in my opinion, if I'm going to be honest with you, is that when I talk about historical context, I think Moore's law is still valid as we look at the whole picture. I also don't want to forget a really important one. That's an oldie, the Marshall Plan, which structured the modern world for a lot of the economic and geopolitical status quo that we live in. And at current times, we are seeing that a lot of international organizations are struggling to keep up with what's going on in the world. And it appears as if there's a chance for some people, some countries, some groups, some organizations, grassroots movements, to remind people of what's important. And there's various other things that I could talk about. I will say, when I was preparing for this talk, I focused way more on Marshall's plan. And then I met his grandson. And that changed a little bit because he reminded me, that's Preston Marshall. He reminded me that the world depends on academics and scientists and deep thinkers. So we can't just focus on the machinery. We need to continue being passionate and taking ownership so that we can ensure that the work that's being done is going to portray how we want to be seen in securing the world and the democratic foundations that we have. I put up here some of the work that I've done. There's a bit more. I'm really, really proud of the one that's the oldest, the role of safe havens and Islamic terrorism. It talks about the tri-border area in South America. And I started that work in the late 90s. I worked on it through college and then grad school, and I published it after graduating. It still gets referenced to this day because those places are now safe havens for cyber operations as well. I also presented a few years ago with another colleague on outsourcing cyber war, which was a phenomenal experience. We essentially pretended to be bad hackers. And I say bad hackers because, you know, there's good hackers, bad hackers. And we try to determine how much would it cost to conduct a cyber war. I don't have the details with me now, it was a few years ago, but it was super interesting and a little bit scary to see what's possible. A lot of the work that we're doing now focuses on cloud security. And I really, really cannot emphasize enough that diversity, inclusion, but also multi-factor authentication, patches. And one thing that I think needs more publicity, think of vulnerabilities and unpatched systems in the cloud world. Think of them as just simple misconfigurations in the cloud. That just means like a typo sometimes. So remember that. But on that good note, I took out the cool slide that said there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because I really do think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that a lot of the work we do only gets better as more people come into the field with different perspectives and different ideas. So thank you, everyone, the organizers and everybody who's volunteering and everybody who's here.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you resolve attribution?
I knew I was going to get that question. I think attribution is a very complex topic. It is challenging. It is not impossible. However, at the end of the day, you need to determine what kind of attribution do you need. Do you need attribution on the state level, on the actor level, individual level? Because that will drive your response. Now, if you don't need to have an individual level attribution, you may just need to know that it's a criminal actor from Southeast Asia. But you might actually need to know that it's a Russian APT. So those things matter, and depending on the situations, we put in more resources to do deep dives, and we work on looking at the data, validating the data, trying to reconcile the data, because you have to remember CTI work, we have data from like 20, 30 years ago. They don't all match what we work with now. And some folks still have things that are in just their notebooks that are relevant. Now, bringing that idea in, I think it's really important to consider attribution in the sense of what are you trying to resolve in the end?
Brass operators, for example. Specialized national
Okay.
security law. I did a lot of research and I haven't found certain to this. You know, it's easier to do on individual level, but when you go beyond that, when it's like two governments, like nations involved, how do you attribute that to nations?
So for nation state attribution that we've done, a lot of it takes in consideration typical working hours that we see the operators on hands-on keyboard. Were they following Middle Eastern practices of a 4-day work week? Were they following the timeline of some like a work week from a South American region? We also look at artifacts in the malware, whether there's language artifacts, whether there's sometimes operators will put campaign codes in there. It's not easy to do. What we work with is clustering. And with enough clustering, we are sometimes able to connect them and merge clusters to nation states. A lot of the time, we also talk in terms of, we know this activity is related. We can't like definitively attribute it at this moment because of changing trends. You're welcome.
I'm the director of cybersecurity. So you're talking about big, and I'm dealing with these. My job is to secure that organization, make sure that it is not compromised or breached, which is an impossible task. Because we all know we're gonna have a compromise at some point. Luckily, the ones we've had so far didn't. But how do I, as the cybersecurity operations director in a hospital or any industry, use this great intelligence to help me every single day in my job? How do I pay attention to what's going on and what's important to me? How do I use that?
Sure. What we're doing now, which is fascinating, is attempting to eliminate the need for directors and C-suite to have to go in depth into all of those things. We're working on summarizing data that is relevant to different industries. So if you were to go on your tip, you could look at, oh, I'm concerned about the healthcare industry, but only in this region of the world. You'd be able to only see information related to that, as well as choose the kind of data and information you want to acquire. A lot of the work that the Security AI Workbench that we're working on is bringing together the understanding that all of the analysts have to do the work. The C-suite just gets the mitigations and the bottom line up front. Mm-hmm.
Those nailed down things that help me plug holes in my environment every day that come out of the large picture of things that we got. So I look forward to that.
Definitely. No, this is super exciting. Coming into Google Cloud has been absolutely phenomenal for our ability to get to other organizations and customers who may not have had the resources to get that very multi-million-dollar incident response and threat intelligence. It's bringing the cloud security to organizations. Yes. Thank you. No.
I recently graduated as a student in cybersecurity from Vietnam, and given that it has been challenging to find a job in cybersecurity as an international person because many US companies require US citizenship. I believe that having this unique background can like be an advantage in the field. So my question is, since you're in Google's nation state analysis team, do you have foreigners in your team? And if not, how do you think they can be beneficial?
I'm going to answer this question in a very safe way, which is we absolutely have all kinds of nationalities on our team, and we really do. We have both naturalized and not. We also have folks that work worldwide. I can talk to you more about this offline, but there's definitely a place for you. Absolutely. Anyone else? Yes. Well, I thought I was going to be an astronaut, much like the rest of us, when I was like 5 years old. And then when I was 6, I saw Halley's Comet, and I absolutely knew I was going to be an astronaut. My first astronomy class, I was asked to maybe withdraw because it wasn't my forte. So I switched over to just doing, astronomy and computers on the side and doing military history by day. Turns out they're really, really closely related if you dig deep enough.
Reading about novel activities in space, I was fascinated by how much.
You should absolutely join the group. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Let's see.
But maybe later.
If we still have a little bit of time, I can.
And
Let's see. Questions from the audience. Where do we see that?
There's one question.
I don't see the question either.
Maybe I'll do it. Maybe so, yeah, it's only to everyone. Oh, it's only on the screen.
Oh, no, I have some here. No, these are, yep. I do see everybody's questions now. Okay, let's see this one. Oh, I'm so sorry. These are my polls to you guys as attendants. I'm in the wrong spot. I cannot see the questions. I apologize.
If you're done here, is to tell us that the audio was trouble in the beginning, but we fixed that already, so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know about the slides. It depends whether the organizers are happy to share, but I defer to them. Thank you so much.